The morning sun filtered through the thin curtains of Elena's small bedroom, but she couldn't enjoy its warmth. Her hands shook as she stared at the formal invitation card that had arrived the night before. Golden letters on cream paper announced her engagement to Roberto Vega, a man she had met only twice in her entire life. Elena sat on the edge of her bed, trying to process what was happening to her. At 22, she thought she had more time to figure out her life. She was studying art at the local college, dreaming of opening her own gallery someday, but now those dreams felt like they were slipping away with each passing second. Her mother's voice echoed from downstairs, talking excitedly on the phone with her aunt about wedding preparations. The sound made Elena's stomach turn. How could her own family be so happy about something that felt like a prison sentence to her? She walked to her small mirror and looked at her reflection. Her long dark hair framed a face that still looked so young to her. How could her parents think she was ready for marriage, especially to someone who was older than her own father? Their memory of meeting Roberto Vega still made her uncomfortable. He had visited their house twice to meet the family. Both times he barely spoke to her directly. Instead, he talked business with her father while she served tea and remained silent, as was expected. His cold eyes had studied her like she was an object he was considering purchasing. Elena grabbed her phone and called her best friend Maya. "Can you believe this is actually happening?" she whispered into the phone. Maya's voice was full of sympathy. "I still can't believe your parents are doing this to you. It's not fair, Elena. You should have the right to choose who you marry. My father says Roberto is a good match. He has money, he's established, and he can provide for our family. But, Maya, he's 50 years old. I feel sick just thinking about spending my life with him." "There has to be something you can do," Maya said. "What if you just refuse to go through with it?" Elena had already thought about this. "You know my family. If I refuse, they'll cut me off completely. I won't have money for college, I won't have anywhere to live, and they'll make my life miserable until I agree." "What about running away? Where would I go? I don't have enough money saved up and I can't ask you to support me. Your family has their own problems." Elena heard her mother calling her name from downstairs. "I have to go. My mother probably wants to discuss wedding dress shopping or something. Equally horrible." After hanging up, Elena sat in silence for a moment. She felt trapped, like a bird in a cage that was getting smaller every day. There had to be something she could do, some way to escape this situation. That evening, she met Maya and their friend Carmen at a small cafe near the college. The three girls had been friends since high school, and Elena trusted them completely. "I've been thinking about your situation all day," Carmen said, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "And I might have an idea, but you're probably not going to like it." Elena leaned forward. "At this point, I'm willing to listen to anything." Carmen looked around to make sure no one was listening, then spoke in a low voice. "You know how traditional your family is, right? They care a lot about honor and reputation." "Unfortunately, yes, that's part of the problem." "Well, what if you did something that made you unsuitable for marriage in their eyes?" Maya raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Carmen hesitated. "I mean, what if you weren't, pure anymore? Your family is so traditional that they might call off the engagement if they thought you weren't suitable for Roberto." Elena felt her cheeks burn. "Carmen, I can't believe you're suggesting that. I know it sounds crazy, but think about it. Your family arranged this marriage partly because they think you're innocent and proper. If that changed, maybe Roberto wouldn't want to marry you anymore." Maya shook her head. "That's a huge risk, Carmen. What if her family gets even angrier?" "They might be angry, but they can't force Roberto to marry her if he doesn't want to. And men like him care about reputation too." Elena stared into her coffee cup thinking. The idea was shocking, but in a strange way it made sense. Her family's traditional values were being used to trap her, but maybe those same values could be used to free her. "I can't just do something like that with anyone," Elena said quietly. "It would have to be someone, I don't know, someone I could trust." "It doesn't have to be someone you know," Carmen replied. "Actually, it might be better if it was a stranger. No complications afterward." Elena spent the next 3 days thinking about Carmen's suggestion. The idea terrified her, but it also gave her the first feeling of hope she'd had since receiving the engagement announcement. On Friday evening, she made her decision. She put on her best dress, a simple but elegant black number that made her feel more confident than usual. She spent extra time on her makeup and hair, trying to look older and more sophisticated than her 22 years. The Grand Plaza Hotel was the most expensive place in the city. Elena had never been inside before, but she knew it was where wealthy businessmen stayed when they visited. If she was going to go through with this plan, she wanted to find someone who seemed safe and reliable. The hotel bar was dimly lit and filled with well-dressed people talking in quiet voices. Elena felt nervous as she walked in, but she tried to project confidence. She ordered a glass of wine and looked around the room, trying to find someone who seemed approachable. That's when she saw him. He was sitting alone at the end of the bar, wearing an expensive charcoal gray suit. He looked to be in his early 30s, with dark hair and strong features. There was something about the way he sat, confident but not arrogant, that caught her attention. He was staring into his whiskey glass like he was lost in deep thoughts. Elena took a deep breath and approached him. Her heart was beating so fast she was sure everyone in the bar could hear it. "Excuse me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Is anyone sitting here?" He looked up at her with startling green eyes. "No, please, sit down." Elena settled onto the bar stool next to him, trying to think of what to say next. This was so far outside her comfort zone that she felt like she was watching someone else live her life. "You look like you have something on your mind," she said, surprising herself with how steady her voice sounded. He smiled slightly. "You could say that. Work has been challenging lately." "What kind of work do you do?" "Business. Nothing very exciting." He studied her face. "What about you? You seem young to be in a place like this alone." Elena felt her cheeks get warm. "I'm 22, and I'm here because I need to do something that scares me." There was something in her voice that made him turn to face her completely. "What kind of something?" Elena looked into his eyes and saw kindness there, along with intelligence and strength. For reasons she couldn't explain, she felt like she could trust him. "I need to change my life," she said simply. "And I think you might be able to help me." The conversation that followed was unlike anything Elena had ever experienced. The stranger, who told her to call him Alex, listened to her story without judgment. She didn't tell him all the details, but she explained that she was trying to escape an arranged marriage. "That's a serious decision," he said after she finished talking. "Are you sure this is what you want to do?" Elena looked at him and nodded. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." What happened next changed everything for both of them, though neither realized it at the time. Elena woke up to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then everything came flooding back: the hotel room, the stranger with green eyes, the decision that had changed everything. She turned to look at the other side of the bed, but it was empty. The sheets were still warm, but Alex was gone. Elena sat up, pulling the blanket around herself, and looked around the room. There was no note, no sign that he had ever been there except for the faint scent of his cologne on the pillow. A wave of panic washed over her. What had she done? She had given herself to a complete stranger, someone whose last name she didn't even know. The reality of her situation hit her like a cold splash of water. Elena quickly got dressed and left the hotel, her mind racing. She had gotten what she wanted, hadn't she? Now she could tell her family what had happened, and they would have to call off the engagement. Roberto would never want to marry her once he knew the truth. The walk home felt longer than usual. Every step brought her closer to a conversation that would change her life forever. She knew her parents would be furious, but she hoped that once they understood why she had done it, they might forgive her. When Elena opened the front door of her family's small house, she found her mother in the kitchen, humming while she prepared breakfast. The sight of her mother's happy face made Elena's stomach twist with guilt. "Elena, there you are," her mother said with a smile. "I was wondering where you went so early." Come, sit down. I want to talk to you about the wedding flowers. Elena took a deep breath. There was no point in waiting. Mom, I need to tell you something important. Something in Elena's voice made her mother stop what she was doing and turn around. What is it, dear? You look pale. I can't marry Roberto, Elena said quietly. I won't marry him. Her mother's face darkened. Elena, we've discussed this. The engagement is final. Roberto is a good man who can provide for you. Mom, you don't understand. I can't marry him because... Elena struggled to find the right words. Because I'm not suitable for him anymore. What do you mean? Elena felt tears starting to form in her eyes. I mean that I'm not pure anymore. I was with someone last night. The silence that followed was deafening. Elena watched as her mother's face went through a series of emotions: confusion, disbelief, and then anger. What did you say? Her mother whispered. I was with a man last night, so you see Roberto won't want to marry me now. The sound of her mother's hand hitting her cheek echoed through the kitchen. Elena's face stung, but she had expected this reaction. How could you do this to our family? Her mother shouted. How could you bring such shame on us? Elena's father appeared in the doorway, drawn by the commotion. What's happening here? Her mother turned to him, tears streaming down her face. Your daughter has disgraced our family. She says she was with a man last night. Elena's father looked at her with a mixture of disappointment and disgust that cut deeper than any physical blow could have. Is this true? Elena nodded, unable to speak. Get out of my sight, her father said quietly. Go to your room and don't come out until I decide what to do with you. Elena spent the rest of the day in her room listening to her parents argue downstairs. She could hear them making phone calls, probably to Roberto and his family. Every now and then she caught fragments of their conversation through the thin walls. Ruined herself. Ungrateful child. Don't know what to do. By evening, Elena's plan had worked better than she had hoped. Roberto's family had called off the engagement immediately. They wanted nothing to do with someone who had brought shame to their name. Elena should have felt relieved, but instead, she felt empty and alone. 3 weeks passed. Elena's parents barely spoke to her, and when they did, it was only to remind her of the shame she had brought to their family. She continued going to college, but everything felt different now. She had gotten her freedom, but at a cost she hadn't fully understood. It was during her morning art class that Elena first noticed something was wrong. The smell of paint, which had never bothered her before, suddenly made her feel sick. She ran to the bathroom and threw up, thinking she must have eaten something bad. But when the same thing happened the next day and the day after that, Elena began to worry. She remembered learning about the signs of pregnancy in health class, but she pushed the thought away. It couldn't be possible. They had been careful, hadn't they? Elena bought a pregnancy test from a pharmacy across town, where nobody would recognize her. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely open the package. When she saw the result, her world tilted on its axis. Positive. She stared at the little plastic stick, hoping it was wrong. She took another test, then another. They were all the same. Elena was pregnant with the child of a man whose name she didn't even know. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had escaped one trap only to fall into another. How could she raise a child? On her own? She was still in college, still living with her parents who already thought she was a disgrace. What would they say when they found out about this? Elena knew she had to find Alex. She had to tell him what had happened. But how could she find a man she only knew by his first name? She didn't even know what hotel he had been staying at. All she remembered was that he had mentioned working in business. For days, Elena walked around the city hoping to catch a glimpse of him. She visited every upscale hotel, every business district, but it was like looking for a needle in a haystack. She began to think she would never see him again. Then, one afternoon while Elena was sitting in the college library, she overheard two students talking about internships at major companies. One of them mentioned Stone Enterprises, the biggest corporation in the city. The CEO is supposed to be really young, one student was saying. Alexander Stone. He's only 31, but he's already made the company twice as successful as it was when his father ran it. Elena's heart stopped. Alexander. Alex. Could it be the same person? She quickly searched for Stone Enterprises on her phone. The company website showed a professional photo of their CEO, and Elena's breath caught in her throat. It was him. The same green eyes, the same strong jawline, the same confident expression she remembered from that night at the hotel. The man she had spent the night with wasn't just any businessman. He was Alexander Stone, one of the most powerful and wealthy men in the entire city, and now he was the father of her unborn child. Elena stared at the photo on her phone screen, feeling overwhelmed. How could she possibly approach someone like him? He lived in a completely different world from hers. What would a man like Alexander Stone want with a college student like her? But she knew she had no choice. She had to tell him about the baby. It was the right thing to do, even if it terrified her. Elena took a deep breath and made a decision that would change both of their lives forever. She was going to find Alexander Stone and tell him he was going to be a father. Elena stood outside the towering glass building that housed Stone Enterprises, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. She had been standing there for 20 minutes, trying to work up the courage to walk through those imposing front doors. The building stretched up into the sky, all gleaming windows and polished steel. People in expensive suits walked in and out with purpose, looking like they belonged in this world of power and money. Elena looked down at her simple college clothes and felt completely out of place. She had spent 3 days preparing for this moment. 3 days of practicing what she would say, how she would explain who she was and why she needed to see Alexander Stone. But now that she was actually here, all those carefully planned words seemed to disappear from her mind. A security guard noticed her standing outside and walked over. "Miss, are you okay? You've been standing out here for a while." Elena looked up at the kind-faced man and realized she probably looked suspicious just standing there staring at the building. "I'm fine, thank you. I need to see someone inside." "Do you have an appointment?" the guard asked. Elena shook her head. "No, but it's important. Very important." The guard studied her face and seemed to recognize the desperation there. "Well, you'll need to go through the main lobby and speak to the receptionist. She can help you schedule something." Elena nodded and took a deep breath. There was no turning back now. She walked through the revolving doors and found herself in a marble lobby that was bigger than her entire house. Everything was pristine and expensive looking, from the artwork on the walls to the fresh flowers on the reception desk. The receptionist was a polished woman in her 30s who looked like she could be in a magazine. When Elena approached, she looked up with a professional smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Good morning, how can I help you?" Elena's mouth felt dry. "I need to see Alexander Stone, please." The receptionist's smile became even more artificial. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I really need to speak with him. It's personal. I'm sorry, but Mr. Stone doesn't take unscheduled meetings. His calendar is booked months in advance. If you'd like to schedule something, I can have someone from his office call you." Elena felt panic rising in her chest. She couldn't wait months. Every day that passed, her pregnancy would become more obvious. "Please, you don't understand. I just need 5 minutes with him. Miss, I understand you think your matter is urgent, but Mr. Stone is a very busy man. Without an appointment, I cannot help you." Elena was about to give up when she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Actually, I think I can help with this situation." She turned around, and there he was. Alexander Stone, looking exactly like he had that night at the hotel, except now he was wearing an even more expensive suit and carried himself with the confidence of someone who owned the building they were standing in. Elena felt the world spin around her. She had imagined this moment so many times, but now that it was happening, she couldn't remember how to speak. Alexander's green eyes met hers, and she saw recognition flash across his face. For a moment, neither of them moved. The busy lobby continued around them, but Elena felt like they were the only two people in the world. I think we need to talk, Alexander said quietly. He led her to a private elevator that required a special key card. They rode up in silence, Elena's mind racing with everything she wanted to say. When the doors opened, they were on the top floor, in an office that was bigger than most apartments. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the entire city. Alexander's desk was made of dark wood and covered with papers and computer screens. Everything about the space screamed success and power. "Please, sit down," Alexander said, gesturing to a leather chair across from his desk. Elena sat down, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Now that they were alone, she didn't know where to begin. "I have to admit I'm surprised to see you," Alexander said, settling into his chair. "I looked for you that morning, but you were gone." "You looked for me?" Elena was surprised. "Of course, I did. What we shared that night, it wasn't something I could just forget." Elena felt her cheeks warm at the memory. "I thought you left because you wanted to forget it happened." "No," Alexander said firmly. "I left because I had an early meeting and I didn't want to wake you. When I came back, you were gone." This changed everything Elena had thought about. That morning, she had assumed he had used her and left, but apparently he had been looking for her too. "Why are you here?" Alexander asked gently. "Not that I'm not happy to see you, but showing up at my office, this must be important." Elena took a deep breath. This was it, the moment that would change everything. "Alexander, I'm pregnant." The silence that followed felt endless. Elena watched as different emotions crossed Alexander's face: shock, disbelief, and then something that looked like fear. "Are you sure?" he finally asked. Elena nodded. "I've taken 3 tests. They're all positive." Alexander stood up and walked to the window, his back to her. Elena couldn't see his expression and the uncertainty was killing her. "It's mine?" he asked quietly. Elena felt a flash of anger. "Yes, it's yours. You were my first, Alexander, my only." He turned around and Elena saw something in his eyes that she couldn't identify. "Your first?" "Yes." Elena felt embarrassed admitting this, but he deserved to know the truth. "That night with you, it was my first time." Alexander sat back down, running his hands through his hair. "Elena, why didn't you tell me that night?" "Because it didn't seem important then. I just needed to change my life and you helped me do that." "And now?" Elena looked down at her hands. "Now I don't know what to do. My family already hates me for what I did. When they find out about the baby..." She couldn't finish the sentence. Alexander was quiet for a long moment, thinking. When he spoke again, his voice was calm and steady. "What do you want from me?" Elena looked up at him. "I don't want anything from you. I just thought you had the right to know." "That's it? You just wanted to tell me and then leave?" Elena nodded. "I know you have your own life, your own world. I don't expect anything." Alexander leaned forward in his chair. "Elena, you're carrying my child. That makes this my responsibility too. I can handle this on my own. Maybe you can, but you shouldn't have to." Alexander stood up and began pacing behind his desk. "This situation is complicated, but we need to figure out a solution that works for both of us." Elena watched him pace, trying to read his expression. "What kind of solution?" Alexander stopped pacing and looked directly at her. "Marry me." Elena's mouth fell open. "What?" "Marry me," Alexander repeated. "It makes sense. The baby needs a father, and you need security. I need..." He paused. "Let's just say this arrangement would benefit both of us." Elena stared at him in disbelief. "Alexander, you can't be serious. We barely know each other." "We know each other well enough to create a life together," he said with a slight smile. "Look, I'm not talking about love or romance. I'm talking about a practical arrangement that solves both of our problems." "What problems could you possibly have? You're successful, wealthy, powerful." Alexander's expression became serious again. "My board of directors has been pressuring me to settle down. They think a married CEO looks more stable, more trustworthy. I've been avoiding their matchmaking attempts for months. So you want to use me to solve your business problems? And I want to help you solve yours, Alexander said. Elena, think about it. If we're married, your family will have to accept the situation. The baby will have my name, my protection, my resources. You'll never have to worry about money or security again. Elena felt overwhelmed. An hour ago, she had just wanted to tell him about the pregnancy. Now he was proposing marriage. This is crazy, she said. Maybe, but sometimes crazy solutions work better than conventional ones. Elena looked around the luxurious office, then back at Alexander. He was offering her a way out of all her problems, but it would mean entering a completely different kind of trap. If I said yes, she said slowly, what would you expect from me? Nothing you're not comfortable with, Alexander replied. We would live together, appear together at business functions, present ourselves as a married couple. But beyond that, you would have your own space, your own life, and the baby would be our child, raised by both of us. Elena felt like her head was spinning. I need time to think about this. Alexander nodded. Of course, but Elena, don't take too long. The sooner we handle this situation, the better it will be for everyone involved. As Elena left the building that day, she felt more confused than ever. She had come looking for answers and instead found herself with an impossible choice: marry a man she barely knew, or face an uncertain future as a single mother. Either way, her life was about to change forever. Elena stared at the marriage certificate in her hands, still not quite believing it was real. 3 weeks had passed since Alexander's proposal, and now she was officially Mrs. Stone. The ceremony had been small and simple, held at the courthouse with only Maya as her witness and Alexander's assistant handling the paperwork. Standing in the entrance hall of Alexander's mansion, Elena felt like she had stepped into a different world. The house was enormous, with high ceilings, marble floors, and paintings that looked like they belonged in a museum. Everything was beautiful but cold, like a fancy hotel rather than a home. Your room is upstairs, Alexander said, carrying her single suitcase. I thought you'd be more comfortable having your own space. Elena followed him up a curved staircase that was wider than her bedroom back home. He led her down a long hallway, lined with doors, and stopped at one near the end. This is yours, he said, opening the door. Elena gasped. The room was bigger than her family's entire living room. It had a king-sized bed, a sitting area with a fireplace, and huge windows that looked out over a perfectly manicured garden. There was even a walk-in closet that was already filled with clothes in her size. How did you know my size? Elena asked, running her fingers over a soft sweater. I asked Maya, Alexander admitted. I thought you might need some things for business, events. Elena looked at the expensive clothes and felt overwhelmed again. Everything was happening so fast. One day she was a struggling college student, and now she was married to one of the richest men in the city. Alexander, I don't know how, to be the wife of someone like you, she said quietly. He set down her suitcase and looked at her seriously. You don't have to be anyone except yourself, Elena. This marriage is about solving practical problems, remember? You don't need to change who you are. Over the first few weeks of their arrangement, Elena slowly began to adjust to her new life. The house staff was kind but kept their distance, treating her with the formal respect they showed Alexander. She had her own car, her own credit cards, and more freedom than she had ever experienced. But she was also lonely. Alexander left early, for work each morning, and often didn't return until late at night. When they did see each other, their conversations were polite but distant, like two strangers sharing the same space. Elena continued going to college, though she could tell her classmates were curious about her sudden change in circumstances. She wore her simple clothes and tried to act normal, but everyone had noticed the expensive wedding ring on her finger. You're married? Maya asked one day as they sat in the college cafeteria. Elena, you never told me you were seeing anyone seriously. Elena had sworn Maya to secrecy about the real situation, but she still felt guilty about lying to her best friend. It happened quickly, she said, which was at least partially true. He must be something special for you to marry him so fast. When do I get to meet him? Elena changed the subject. But she knew she couldn't avoid these questions forever. Being married to Alexander Stone meant her life was no longer private. One evening, about a month after their wedding, Elena was in the kitchen making herself a late dinner when Alexander came home. She was surprised to see him before 10 o'clock. "You're home early," she said, looking up from her sandwich. "Board meeting got canceled." Alexander loosened his tie and sat down across from her at the kitchen island. "How was your day?" "Fine. I had classes. Then I came home and worked on a painting." Alexander's eyes lit up with interest. "You paint?" "I didn't know that." Elena felt a little embarrassed. "It's just a hobby. I'm studying art in college, but I'm not very good at it." "Can I see some of your work?" Elena hesitated. Her paintings were personal, and she wasn't used to sharing them with anyone except her art teacher. But something in Alexander's expression made her want to show him. "Okay, but don't expect too much." She led him up to her room, where she had set up a small easel by the window. Alexander looked at the painting she was working on, a city street, seen with people hurrying past each other, all looking lonely despite being surrounded by others. "Elena, this is incredible," Alexander said softly. "You have real talent." Elena felt her cheeks warm at the praise. "You're just being nice." "I'm not the kind of person who says things I don't mean," Alexander replied. "This painting, it captures something most people miss. The isolation that exists even in crowded places." Elena looked at him with surprise. "That's exactly what I was trying to show." "You succeeded." Alexander studied the painting more closely. "Have you ever had your work displayed anywhere?" "Just in college art shows. Nothing important." "I know several gallery owners in the city. I could arrange for them to look at your work." Elena shook her head quickly. "Oh no, I couldn't. I'm not ready for that." "Why not?" "Elena, you shouldn't hide this kind of talent. Because I'm not good enough yet. And people would only pay attention because I'm married to you, not because my art is worth anything." Alexander was quiet for a moment. "You might be surprised, but I won't push. When you're ready, just let me know." This conversation marked a turning point in their relationship. Alexander began coming home earlier, and they started having dinner, together most nights. Elena discovered that behind his serious businessman exterior, Alexander was actually quite funny and surprisingly easy to talk to. "Tell me about your family," Elena said one evening as they shared Chinese takeout in his study. Alexander's expression became guarded. "Not much to tell. My father built Stone Enterprises, and when he died 5 years ago, I took over." "What about your mother?" "She left when I was 12. Decided she preferred a life without the responsibility of a child." Elena felt her heart ache for him. "That must have been hard." "I survived." Alexander's voice was matter-of-fact, but Elena could hear the old pain underneath. "What about your family? Are you planning to tell them about the baby soon?" Elena's hand automatically went to her stomach, which was just starting to show a small bump. "I don't know. They're still barely speaking to me after everything that happened. They'll come around when they realize their grandchild will be a Stone. Maybe. Or maybe they'll just see it as more proof that I've ruined my life." Alexander looked at her seriously. "Elena, you haven't ruined anything. You made a choice to take control of your life, and that took courage. Some days I'm not sure it was the right choice. Do you regret marrying me?" Elena considered the question. "No, I don't regret it. But sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had tried to handle everything on my own. You would have struggled. You would have been alone and scared, trying to raise a child while finishing school with no support. And now? Now you have support. You have security. And you have someone who wants to make sure you and our child are taken care of." Elena felt something flutter in her chest at the way he said, "Our child." Over the past few weeks, she had started to see glimpses of the man Alexander could be when he let his guard down. He was kind, thoughtful, and surprisingly protective of her. As her pregnancy progressed, Alexander became more attentive. He made sure she was eating well, that she wasn't overexerting herself, and that she had everything she needed for her doctor's appointments. When morning sickness made it hard for her to keep food down, he brought her ginger tea and crackers without being asked. "You don't have to take care of me like this," Elena said one morning after he brought her breakfast in bed. "Yes, I do," Alexander replied simply. "You're carrying my child. Taking care of you is taking care of both of you." Elena was touched by his concern, but she was also confused by her own feelings. This was supposed to be a practical arrangement, but somewhere along the way, she had started to care about Alexander as more than just the father of her baby. She found herself looking forward to their evening conversations, enjoying his dry sense of humor, and feeling proud when he told her about his successes at work. When he smiled at her, really smiled, not just the polite expression he wore for business, Elena felt her heart skip a beat, but she reminded herself constantly that this wasn't real. Alexander had married her to solve problems, not because he loved her. She couldn't let herself forget that, no matter how kind he was or how safe she felt in his presence. The problem was, it was getting harder and harder to remember that their marriage was just an arrangement, especially when Alexander looked at her like she was the most important person in his world. Elena woke up to a sharp pain in her lower back. She rolled over in bed trying to find a comfortable position, but the pain only got worse. At 7 months pregnant, she had gotten used to various aches and discomforts, but this felt different. This felt urgent. Another wave of pain hit her, stronger this time, and Elena realized with growing panic that these weren't just backaches. She was having contractions, but it was too early. The baby wasn't supposed to come for another 2 months. "Alexander," she called out, forgetting that his bedroom was down the hall and he probably couldn't hear her. Elena tried to get out of bed, but another contraction stopped her in her tracks. The pain was so intense that it took her breath away. She managed to reach for her phone on the nightstand and called Alexander's number with shaking hands. "Elena, it's 6 in the morning. What's wrong?" Alexander's voice was immediately alert. "Something's happening," Elena gasped. I think the baby is coming." "I'm on my way." Within seconds, Elena heard Alexander's footsteps running down the hallway. He burst through her bedroom door still in his pajamas, his hair messy from sleep. When he saw Elena doubled over in pain, his face went white. "We need to get you to the hospital right now," he said, moving to help her up. "Alexander, it's too early," Elena said, tears streaming down her face. "What if something's wrong with the baby?" "Nothing is going to be wrong," Alexander said firmly, though Elena could hear the fear in his voice too. "We're going to get you to the hospital, and the doctors are going to take care of both of you." The ride to the hospital was the longest 20 minutes of Elena's life. Alexander held her hand in the back of the car while his driver navigated through the early morning traffic. Every time a contraction hit, Alexander squeezed her hand and told her to breathe. "You're going to be okay," he kept repeating. "Both of you are going to be okay." Elena had never seen Alexander look so scared. This was the man who made million-dollar business decisions without blinking, who commanded respect from powerful people all over the city. But right now he looked like a terrified, expectant father who might lose the 2 most important people in his life. At the hospital, everything happened in a blur. Elena was rushed to the maternity ward while doctors and nurses surrounded her, checking her vital signs and monitoring the baby. Alexander stayed by her side the entire time, refusing to leave even when the medical staff suggested he wait outside. "Mr. Stone, your wife is in premature labor," the doctor explained. "We're going to do everything we can to slow down the contractions and give the baby more time to develop. But I want you to be prepared for the possibility that we might need to deliver today." Elena saw Alexander's jaw clench. "What are the risks?" "At 30 weeks, there are concerns about lung development and overall growth, but babies born at this stage have very good survival rates, especially with the level of care we can provide here." Elena spent the next 12 hours in labor, with Alexander never leaving her side. He held her hand through every contraction, fed her ice chips when she couldn't keep water down, and talked to her constantly to keep her distracted from the pain. "Tell me about the painting you're working on," Alexander said during one particularly difficult stretch. "I can't think about art right now," Elena panted. Yes, you can. Tell me about the colors you're using. Elena found that focusing on something else did help. She described her latest painting in detail, and Alexander listened like it was the most important thing in the world. When we get home, I want to see it finished, he said. Alexander, what if something happens to the baby? Elena asked quietly. Nothing is going to happen. Our daughter is going to be fine. Daughter? How do you know it's a girl? Alexander smiled for the first time all day. I don't know why, but I've always pictured a little girl who looks just like you. At 8 o'clock that evening, their daughter was born. She was tiny, weighing only 4 pounds, but her cry was strong and healthy. Elena burst into tears when she saw her for the first time. She's beautiful, Elena whispered. Alexander was crying, too, though he tried to hide it. She's perfect. Absolutely perfect. The baby had to stay in the neonatal intensive care unit for observation, but the doctors assured them that she was doing well for her early arrival. Elena and Alexander took turns sitting beside her incubator, talking to her and stroking her tiny hands through the openings. It was on the second night, when Elena was finally released from the hospital but chose to stay in the room they had, provided for parents, that she overheard a conversation that changed everything. Alexander was on a business call in the hallway outside her room. Elena had gotten up to check on the baby and heard his voice through the partially open door. No, I won't be coming to the board meeting tomorrow, Alexander was saying. My wife just had our baby and they both need me here. I understand you want to be there for the birth, Mr. Stone, Elena heard an unfamiliar voice say through the phone speaker. But this meeting is crucial for the merger we've been working on for months. Then reschedule it, Alexander said firmly. Nothing is more important than my family right now. Sir, with respect, I thought this marriage was primarily a business arrangement. Surely you can step away for a few hours. Elena held her breath, waiting for Alexander's response. Listen to me very carefully, Alexander said, his voice low and intense. Elena is not a business arrangement. She's my wife, the mother of my child, and the most important person in my life. I don't care if this merger falls through. I don't care if the entire company goes under. I am not leaving this hospital while my family needs me. Elena felt her heart stop. She had never heard Alexander speak with such passion about anything, including his work, which she knew meant everything to him. But sir, the board expects you to prioritize the company. Then the board is going to be disappointed. Elena and our daughter are my priority now. They're my priority always. If anyone has a problem with that, they can find a new CEO. Elena heard Alexander end the call and quickly went back to her bed, pretending to be asleep. But her mind was racing. Had Alexander really just told his business partners that she and the baby were more important than his company? The next morning, Alexander brought Elena coffee and sat down in the chair beside her bed. He looked tired but happier than she had ever seen him. How are you feeling? He asked. Better. Still sore, but better. Elena studied his face. Alexander, can I ask you something? Of course. Last night when you were on that business call, did you really tell them that I was more important than your work? Alexander looked surprised, then slightly embarrassed. You heard that? I did, and I need to know if you meant it, or if you were just saying it because you felt like you had to. Alexander was quiet for a long moment, looking down at his hands. When he finally looked up at Elena, his green eyes were full of an emotion she had never seen there before. Elena, I need to tell you something, and I hope it doesn't scare you away. What is it? I've been in love with you since that first night we met. Not because of our arrangement, not because of the baby, but because of who you are. You're kind, brave, talented, and beautiful. You changed my entire world from the moment you walked into my life. Elena felt tears start to form in her eyes. Alexander, I know this wasn't part of our deal. I know you married me for practical reasons, and I don't expect you to feel the same way. But I can't pretend anymore that this is just business for me. You and our daughter are everything to me. Elena reached out and took his hand. Alexander, you really don't know, do you? Know what? I fell in love with you months ago. I've been terrified to say anything because I thought you only saw me as a solution to your problems. Alexander stared at her in amazement. You love me? I love you, Elena said, laughing through her tears. I love how kind you are, how you take care of me, how you believe in my art when I don't believe in myself. I love watching you talk to our daughter like she's already the most important thing in your life. Alexander leaned over and kissed her gently. We've been two people in love pretending not to be in love. That's exactly what we've been doing. Elena, will you marry me again? Not for practical reasons this time, but because we can't imagine living without each other. Elena smiled. I'd love to marry you again, Alexander Stone. 6 months later, they had a second wedding ceremony in the garden of their home. This time, their baby daughter was there to witness her parents promising to love each other forever. Elena's family, who had finally come around after meeting their granddaughter, sat in the front row alongside Alexander's business partners. As Elena looked at Alexander while they exchanged new vows, she remembered that desperate girl who had walked into a hotel bar trying to escape her old life. She had found something so much better than freedom. She had found love, partnership, and a family she had never dreamed possible. Their story had started with a desperate plan and a stranger in a bar, but it had become something real, something lasting, something worth fighting for, and Elena knew that this was just the beginning of their greatest adventure together.